everyone. Thanks for your time. I'm Evan Wong. If you haven't met me before, I am the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox, the host of today's session. And the session is going to be on cutting through the BS, how real GCs are using AI. We're going to be talking about real use cases of AI, what this means for GCs running a legal department, and more importantly, what this means for our careers as lawyers, legal departments, and really just the future of work. I'm super excited to introduce my guest for today. His name is George. George Hypolite is the former University of Colorado football standout turned general counsel. So I've met a lot of unicorns that have gone from like software programmers to lawyers, and I thought that was an impressive career shift. But this guy, he's gone from a professional football player to a GC. He was anchoring the defensive line for the Buffs, if anyone knows the Buffs, and was signed onto both the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers, but eventually shifted gears to earn his JD, which has led him into a career of being an in-house counsel in both the private and the public sector. And I think George still stays very active, right? If you're not in the courtroom or you're not leading on policy, you're working out, you're shooting hoops, and I heard you do woodworking too, just embarrassing you a little bit there. And if you've heard of the name, the nickname Rabid Goldfish floating around, I think that's him as well. So George, with that introduction, welcome to the show.
Well, Evan, thank you very much. With that introduction, I'm glad I don't have enemies.
And I'm glad you suited up. Like I've dressed up in true startup fashion, but you look like a GC in your beautiful blazer today. Let's start with this first question, a fun question, and then we'll get into it. The fun question is, like, you have to tell us the story behind that nickname. Like, why did people call you the Rabid Goldfish?
You know, some things don't die. Some things will never die, and that's a function of the internet. But a long time ago, when I was in college, I had a sort of random meeting with the creators of South Park. We were at a table at a dinner event. Thought nothing of it. They're nice guys, pretty funny, kind of reserved. Long story short, a year later, ESPN was doing a thing where they had famous people from your university introduce starting lineups. They did it in both basketball and football. We played Nebraska in an ESPN game, so they thought it'd be very cool if Eric Cartman would introduce our starting lineups. So Eric Cartman did. He introduced people as a bunch of funny things. He introduced me as George the Rabid Goldfish Hypolite. The clip is still floating around somewhere there on YouTube. If you watch it, you'll notice he says very after, no one really calls him that. I just made that up, but in true internet fashion, it took off like gangbusters.
That's awesome. I wish the South Park creators gave me a nickname. That's a really cool little fun fact that I hope will never get removed from the internet. And by the way, for everyone else that's joining today, we are taking a slightly more unique format to this webinar. We've taken it as a normal Zoom call so that if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and you can come off mute, optional to come onto camera, and then you can ask myself or George a question, right? So that's an early heads up if you want to ask questions. You can use the chat as well if you're comfortable, but we would love some engagement in this webinar if you'd like to come onto the microphone. All right. I'll probably call you George from here as opposed to the Rabid Goldfish, if that's okay. All right. So George,
I'd appreciate that.
All right, George, let's talk about AI. Let's jump straight into it, right? Like AI is something that really took off about 2 years ago when the world was introduced to ChatGPT as an application of Gen AI. But in the legal department, of course, we're not using it to figure out what recipes to make from our fridge or, like what movies to watch next. Like, what are the forces or the challenges that are at play in a modern legal department that have been pushing GCs like you to increasingly look at AI and implement AI? Talk about some of like the why behind implementing AI.
I think every general counsel, whether in the public or the private sector, we all are at a place or a point where we're trying to leverage resources. No matter what anyone says, I don't care if you work for Walmart, you don't have unlimited resources. There is a finite limit to the amount of attorneys and or amount of staff you can use to complete the legal work. However, I think in our modern day, legal work keeps coming. And we've actually, as a profession, especially from an in-house counsel perspective, branched off into things that are not traditionally legal, but quasi-legal. And as a result, as a general counsel, your attention is constantly being divided. You're constantly, if you're doing the job right, being brought into conversations that maybe 10, 20 years ago, attorneys weren't. And so you still have to do the normal brick and mortar type legal work, but now you're being asked to do what I like to say a higher level of engagement with your client, where you're more of a in-house consultant and less of just pure general counsel. But I don't have unlimited resources. So all of the work we did before took up, 40 hours a day, 365 days a year. Now I'm being asked to do work that maybe takes away more than 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. And you got to find a way to leverage that. And because we have finite resources, we cannot hire full-time employees for all of these things or even part-time employees for all of these things. And I think that artificial intelligence at least has the potential to bridge some of that gap.
Absolutely. You know, what's interesting about what you mentioned is like if you think about private practice, right? All the lawyers there are working on primarily legal issues, but as you go into in-house, you're now a business partner. You're, a peer to the same as your marketing folk or your procurement folk or your commercial folk, product folk, right? And now there's actually a lot of work that actually isn't squarely legal that you still have to do. To your point, like the actual workload is increasing as business complexity, your business grows, regulatory environment gets more complex as well. So then like as you're kind of thinking about AI and you talked about like the resource constraint on that, because we all know that legal headcount does not grow as fast as the business, right? That's always going to be, fundamental truth. So like as a GC, you're thinking a lot about not just how to be the best lawyer in your organization, but also you're thinking about running the legal department and the economics of that department, right? So like how has AI then changed your thinking of what's actually even possible? Like what has it unlocked pre-AI to post-AI?
So I think from a simple fundamental perspective, a typical FTE, depending upon where you are, you're going to pay them, for example, a paralegal somewhere probably between $50 and $100,000 a year plus benefits. They're going to give you in general about 40 hours a week. And so they're going to give you about 12 hours a year. That's about 2 weeks of vacation plus 11 holidays. So you get about 1,900 hours from every FTE you bring in. And that's going to cost you roughly somewhere between, 65 to let's say $120,000. Artificial intelligence, most programs out there, they cost you upfront a fee. Maybe you'll pay some startup costs, but in general, those costs are at most going to be somewhere between $10,000, $20,000 a year. And just from a scale of magnitude, you're talking about maybe 100 times less what it costs for an
Hmm.
AI program than what it costs for an actual FTE. Now, granted, FTEs are a lot different. They can perform more dynamic functions, so on and so forth. But in many practices, in many areas, especially as an in-house counsel, artificial intelligence can be used to help leverage an existing FTE and make them more productive by taking certain ministerial tasks off of their plate and allowing them to focus on more high-level tasks. And I think from a resource constraint perspective, that's generally how managing the economics of a law department, law office work, right? I am trying to find ways to leverage the productivity of my human beings to allow them to get to the things that are going to drive um, results for my client, that are going to drive better revenue, that are going to drive better risk mitigation, all of those things that go into being a general counsel. And so I think that that's where I see from an economic perspective, AI allows me to take, what is 1, 2, 3 staff, and through using AI to complete a lot of ministerial tasks, get them to higher level things and increase that 19, 12 hours of productivity a year, maybe into 25, 2,600 hours of productivity a year, and get to a lot more tasks than we normally would in a more economical and efficient way without having to hire more FTEs.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I personally use a lot of AI in my day-to-day job now, and it's incredible when I look at the kind of use cases that I'm using it for. And I think to myself, without it, I would be spending an hour on this task that I otherwise would spend, like now AI does it all for me in like a minute. It's not like the AI is replacing me. It's not going to replace my role. And I don't think it's going to be replacing the roles in the legal department either. It's really about like augmenting, as you say, like adding more productivity per head count. And I think the other thing, like that's a reality. Goes back to what we said around like one of the key constraints of growing a legal department is actually that headcount. It's not that we're, I think, talking about going the other way. It's not about shrinking teams. I think it's about the fact that, with the constraint on growing teams, how else can we continue to scale with the business if adding headcount is not always a viable option? This has been going around the internet a little bit. The Shopify CEO, I think, a few weeks ago said to their team, like, unless you've proven that you've tried to use AI to solve the problem, you're not allowed to add additional human headcount, right? Like, prove it first with AI and then add the headcount afterwards. My question to you is, with all of this rhetoric, right, and this conversation that you and I are talking about, I can imagine some people could be scared about this, right? Like, should people be worried about their jobs, right? Should legal people be worried about their jobs? And even for the people who aren't, how do GCs and legal ops professionals have these types of conversations, bring people on the change management, right? Because I can see it can be a scary concept if not understood. So, what advice do you have for these people? Maybe let's start with people who are afraid of losing their jobs. What advice do you have for them?
So I would say I 100% recognize people's sensitivity to any form of new technology. I imagine, in the before Christ times or in the early medieval ages, when a scribe heard about a printing press, he immediately thought, I'm no longer going to have a job again, right? And the reality is that we still needed scribes. The printing press just allowed what the scribe could originally write down to get to more people more efficiently and more cost effectively. And so when I talk to people or people ask me about artificial intelligence, I think we have to draw a clear distinction. We're primarily right now talking about generative forms of artificial intelligence, but the intelligence that people are really afraid of, sort of the Terminator thesis, is artificial general intelligence, where artificial intelligence can do everything a human being can. Right now, the artificial intelligence we have, it is really good at doing an assigned task. We can program it to do a limited universe of assigned tasks, and it can become primarily proficient. But that same AI that can generate, for example, a legal document can't go drive a car, can't ride a bike, can't go grocery shopping. It can't do all of the general things a human being can do. And I think when you view it from that perspective, it takes some of the sting away from, hey, this is going to take my job. What I really do think most people who are afraid of AI should realize is AI is really no different than any kind of other general technology. 35 years ago, a smartphone was not even a thing, wasn't a thought. 50 years ago, a personal computer wasn't a thing, right? But those forms of technologies were integrated into our work system and allowed us to be more productive and productive in different ways in different spaces. And I think we need to accept artificial intelligence from that same baseline of not looking at it as it's trying to replace me, but more looking at it as how can this allow me to be more productive in the tasks I do? Maybe there are a lot of tasks I know every lawyer, paralegal, or any legal profession hate doing, right? Most people hate calendaring things when you have a litigation, or most people hate ghostwriting simple letters on behalf of your client. Those are tasks that, when trained appropriately, artificial intelligence can become pretty proficient at, and then save you time to do those more value-added tasks, those more higher-level tasks. And that's when people are afraid of it. I think that's the way you should view AI. It's not here to replace you. It's actually here to help you.
Mm. And so then how do you, and maybe it's the same, but how do you have these conversations with your own team, specifically like the legal department? How do you get them comfortable with starting to use AI at work?
I think there's a huge trial and error aspect to artificial intelligence, because until you use it, if you just read about it, you won't know its limitations. So as I started to use artificial intelligence, I started to realize its limitations in that it matters who asks the artificial intelligence what to do, right? Evan, you and I can ask a piece of artificial intelligence, whether it's open universe or closed universe, to do a task, and how we ask it matters. How we use a large language model matters. And so by playing with it, tweaking with it, asking it to do the same thing in multiple different ways, you often will get very vastly different answers. And so I think from an internal perspective with the folks that I supervise, I really have presented the artificial intelligence tools, gotten them training, and then told them to play with it.
Mm.
See where it adds value to your day. Think about the tasks you do on a day-to-day basis, especially start with the tasks you don't like doing, what you think you shouldn't have to do. And let's see if through prompting, we can get the generative AI to do or get that task to a level where instead of taking you an hour, like you said before, it takes you a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you get people, to see that, oh, there are really ministerial tasks that AI does really proficiently that save me a lot of time, that sort of almost like a gateway opens the door and allows them to see the more higher level uses of artificial intelligence and how to incorporate them in. But I do think you have to start small, get them used to it, get them playing around with it, get them asking prompts, get them understanding how to tweak questions to get the right result. All of those things are, in my opinion, what it takes to get people comfortable with using AI in the workplace.
Completely agree. We did a very similar thing in our organization. I felt like some people were using AI, people were hesitant. Actually, unless you make the message very clear, people aren't even sure should they be using AI in their work. Is it going to be looked positively upon, or is it actually like, oh, you use AI, therefore you didn't put in, the actual hard work? Like, I think there's also a sentiment now where if something's written with the assistance of AI, then it's not as valuable as if it was, written with humans. And I think there's a message that would really help unlock, AI literacy. I think I'm just going to make up that term, AI literacy, which is, telling people, hey, you should be playing around and using AI. And we did this in our organization, and people started to embrace it and use it. But also, I think in the legal department, and we'll talk about this. I'll ask you a question soon enough. Is to couple that with some of the guardrails, right? Like you don't go ahead and put in sensitive client information. Don't put in PII, right? Like if you're going to use AI, these are kind of the basic rules, the guardrails that go along with that encouragement. But so long as it's coming hand in hand, I think that balance will yield very, very positive results. And Sarah, who shared in the chat here, she's one of the attendees right now. She said one of my favorite sentiments shared with me recently is that AI isn't replacing people's jobs. However, it will make those who don't embrace it vulnerable in their workplace. And I could not agree more, Sarah. It's kind of like imagine if to your point, George, like 50 years ago, personal computers came out. Imagine if you decided, you know what, I don't want to use the personal computer. Right? Like, I'm just going to resist that. I'm not going to learn how to do it. Obviously, those people would be in a very, very vulnerable place, and we just don't see that. People not using computers in their workplace today. So it's going to be the same for AI. So we talk a lot about AI. And I think today's session is like cutting through the BS, and hopefully people appreciate how pointy some of these questions are and how honest George has been. Let's get a little bit more tangible. Like when we say AI in legal, what does that actually mean? Like, what are some use cases? What's a good place to start, George, for using AI?
So I think every lawyer, right, whether they realize it or not, has been using machine learning for a pretty long time. If you use LexisNexis or you use Westlaw, that
Mm.
search function is exactly artificial intelligence. It's a form of machine learning. So when you type in sort of Boolean or regular language, what case says this? It is using a form of machine learning to figure it out. AI clearly is a step further than that, but I try to diffuse that and say, hey, that's sort of already happening. So from a research perspective, I think that's a huge use case for lawyers because now a lot of the legal research platforms have incorporated artificial intelligence that allow you to do some pretty cool generative things using large language models. Plus, they are closed loop. So the
Mm.
existing things that I'm aware of, they're closed loop in the sense that only the information that would regularly be available at a research site is what the artificial intelligence will use to generate your answer. And that helps on the back end from a vetting perspective, because most forms of AI that I'm familiar with or that I have used regularly, it footnotes itself. It tells you where it gets the information from, which
Yes.
allows you to go check whether or not it's hallucinating like a normal human being or it's telling you, right, giving you good information. I think that's one of the things that I've had to sort of diffuse a lot from a legal use case perspective is people are saying, aren't you worried about it hallucinating? And my point to people is, well, human beings hallucinate all the time. Human beings say things that are not true. They make up facts, they make up statistics all the time, but we find that as a regular part of human conversation or interaction. But as an attorney, it's my job to vet the information I'm getting and make sure that it's valid, solid before I rely upon it. Using artificial intelligence should be no different. So I think research is a big use case. I think I've also pretty consistently and from the beginning dabbled into the generative side where it can write briefs, at least start briefs, write letters, start contracts, review contracts, give me summary reports, things like that. I think those are also use cases because at the end of the day, those are the huge time savers, right? In my practice, I'm very familiar with getting 1,000-page contracts, and at the end of the day, as efficient as a reader as I am, it takes a long time to read 1,000 pages from a legal content perspective. And so having an artificial intelligence tool to be able to summarize with footnotes so I can go back and check the document and quick reference the document is immensely helpful because where it might have taken me 4 or 5 hours to go through that whole document efficiently, artificial intelligence can normally do it in about a couple minutes, give me those footnotes, and now my review of that document may only take 30 minutes, which now gives me those 3.5 hours back in my life to go do other legal work. So I think primarily for me, those are the two big use cases as a lawyer in terms of generating templates or documents and doing legal research.
Yeah, actually, so AI is such a broad umbrella term. There are actually things that AI does really well today and things that it just doesn't do as well. And so one of the examples that you gave, which is summarization, AI is actually quite good at that. Like they've been doing tests across some of the, the foundation models and things like that recently, and like trying to understand how does it compare against a human in terms of accuracy and things like that. Summarization, research, these are fantastic use cases of AI. I think a recent research was showing like where it's lagging a little bit and where maybe people are feeling some frustration with AI are things like, and I got to be careful here because I do have friends in these other vendor spaces, but like the like AI redlining for contracts, right? Like it's a bit of hit and miss at the moment. So I encourage people who are listening in today to think about AI not as like a broad umbrella of AI to legal, but rather like what is the job that you're asking AI to do, and is that actually a good job for AI to do today? Because it's going to continually to evolve, but for today, is the right job? And I also like to think about it, George, like I think you touched on a really important principle with AI, which is trust but verify. Because if you can't trust AI, then you're probably going to spend more time redoing its work anyway, which is more inefficient. So you have to trust it, but you also need to verify that it's providing something accurate. And I kind of think of it as like a spectrum of work where you have really important high risk work. That's where you really want to put a heavy emphasis on verify, like a human in the loop. And then on the very lower end, you have like these very low risk, high repetitive, like low value. It's okay even if the AI gets it only 90% correct. And there you can be a bit more relaxed with it being a bit more autonomous and self-service. Um, have you seen anything that sits on like that lower end as opposed to that higher end? Like where can people get started where the risks are maybe a bit lower with AI?
Think that's always a tough question for a lawyer to answer because you put 100 lawyers in and talk about risk and you're getting 100 different answers. What I would
Yeah.
say from a personal sort of perspective, the thing that I think AI is really good at is being and low risk is being a front door for communications. So coalescing communications, helping them come in, helping you sort through from an importance perspective, and then sorting them and assigning them really efficiently. There are some very good tools in the market that really can be, your legal front door that can make sure that communications are coming through a very uniform place, can help people navigate and how to submit requests in an appropriate form that you wanted to program, and then can help you sift through that and assign them in your internal team. And I think AI also is doing some really awesome things in calendaring, right? There's some services that can help you if you're a litigator, help you calendar, or even if you're a transactional attorney, help you calendar response deadlines or contractual deadlines or signature things if you do finance work. So I think those kinds of things are, in my opinion, I know some lawyers will say they are high risk because, some of those things can lead to real dollars. But
Mm.
from a strategic perspective, I think they are low risk enough that it is okay to get some artificial intelligence tools in and experiment with using them to sort of complete those front door slash calendaring slash reminder tasks that normally traditionally we've used legal assistants or paralegals to do.
Oh yeah, for sure. Another way I think about it is the AI doing this like substantive law, the practice of law, or is the AI doing the business of law, right? The workflow of law, right? So, if it's going to be to the substance of law, I think that's where it's a bit more high risk. That's kind of like edging into what lawyers are trained to do. But if it's really just taking away, like you and I were just talking about earlier, like all of the administrative, menial tasks, it's actually a great place to start with AI. And I like that you mentioned the front door, and someone in the audience again, Mark asked a few minutes ago, like, what does Checkbox do? George, with your permission, can I share my screen and show a little bit as to what we do and
Sure.
maybe bring to life? Yeah. So this, to be clear, this is not what George's this is not George's environment. This is Checkbox. But Mark, just to explain to you a little bit what Checkbox does, and hopefully help the audience also understand how AI can look like. I'm gonna bring this up real quick here. I thought I'd do a demo on the spot, bit of a spontaneous demo. Um, what Checkbox is a legal intake tool and a workflow automation tool. So think of us as like the AI-powered legal front door that also handles self-service for the low sort of value tasks with reporting across all legal work. So imagine that someone in your business, maybe it's someone from procurement or maybe from your marketing team, they're working with a potential vendor and they go ahead and ask in this chatbot, like, what's our policy in accepting gifts from a potential vendor? Now, this is being shown on this interface here, but this could also live in Slack, if you're a Slack user, in Teams, Microsoft Teams, or even in email, right? So some of our customers get these emails from their business clients, and what happens is the AI will read into your internal policies and playbooks and say, actually, we have a pretty strict policy around accepting gifts. Here's a summary of it. And to George's point, we do the trust and verify, so the citations concept. So where is it getting this information? Well, it's telling me that it's pulling from the gifts and entertainment policy Word document, and it's this particular paragraph that it's reading from, right? And let's say that I want to have a conversation with this AI. I might have already accepted a gift. So I'd say like, oops, sorry, I've already accepted it. Can you now help me declare it? Since you've told me that one of the things I have to do is to declare it. So not only has the AI given me an answer, it's now going to go through the motions of actually uh, creating a matter for me. But it's smart enough to know that for a gifts and entertainment related matter, it needs to know these five pieces of information. Things like the type of gift, which I might just say it was let's say it's a gold Rolex. What else? Name of the individual. So let's say from Checkbox, who is a vendor potentially, and let's say that it is in the middle of an RFP. Now, what you'll notice is I purposely omitted the estimated value and the date in which I received the gift. Now, what will happen in this case is the AI will know that it's missing, right? It says, well, to complete this, you've missed the date. So I need this to actually completely get this done for you. So I might say it was a 20, oops, it was a 20K, I think, gift, and I received it, let's say, I don't know, let's just say it was today, 18th of June, 2025. At this point, the AI has all of the information that it needs. It's done the back and forth. Again, we talk about this, George, right? Like the menial administrative tasks. Like no lawyer wants to do the what is it like they want to be the cook in the kitchen. They don't want to be the server that's running in between the tables, right? And so what the AI is doing here is it's doing the back and forth. It's collecting all the information so it's so the legal team can be briefed correctly. It's doing a summary, but then it's also gone ahead and created the actual matter. So when I click onto that link, you can see that the back and forth conversation that the requester, myself, Evan, with the AI is captured. So again, we can trust and verify. But what's more impressive is on the right-hand side, all of the fields of the matter has been automatically created by the AI. It's selected that it's a physical gift. It knows that a Rolex is a physical gift, not a meal. It knows that it's from Checkbox. The 20K has made its way into the gift value, the date that it was received, and it filled out that it's an active, tender. You can see it even creates the description, right? Like gold Rolex watch from Checkbox from an active RFP. This is quite profound because in the past, these tools required a lot of manual data entry, right? Like create ticket, fill in forms, like update fields, and that has to be pushed onto the client or onto the legal team. And so here, really, AI is playing uh, uh, a very efficient role in collecting the right information up front. And then, of course, all of these fields would flow into reporting, right? So you can see what's open, what's closed, the average time, which departments from the business is sending through requests, the volume of work, the allocation of work across the team, and then you can always click in and drill down into the specific work as well. And so it's sort of this seamless flow, right? Like AI is really now enabled from business request start through to answers to back and forth into reporting without manual data entry.
And then I think the one thing you sort of should mention here is that this is seamless for the user, right? For the external user, they don't see all of this back of the house things that are going on. To them, it's no different than if they sent an email to your legal assistant and said, "Can you help me with this thing?" And I think that's the real benefit of front door legal software, legal services, is that to the end user, it feels and looks no different. But from a use case perspective, from a general counsel perspective, that interaction saves me what every year hundreds of thousands of dollars.
You absolutely nailed it because I think one of the things that we realized is the reason why not more front doors have been put in place in the past is legal teams and GCs are really client focused. We want to be a great business partner. And even though we want the data and we want the efficiencies, we don't want to push that change onto our clients and make it harder for them and more friction to engage with the legal department. And you're exactly right, because I think one of the key value propositions of this is you meet the business where they are, right? They don't change the behavior. They just send that email as they always have. And all of this magic happens in the background. They don't even need to worry about it. I love that. So we've talked a lot about why AI is important and sort of given the audience today a look at how it can be applied. And hopefully, Mark, this is now super clear to you what Checkbox does. Thanks for the question. Let's take sort of the devil's advocate view, right? Like let's say you had a legal team that deploys AI and it goes horribly wrong. What was likely to happen? Like what kind of considerations, steps should legal teams be asking and thinking about as they're introducing AI so they don't end up in that situation where, it didn't go to plan?
So I think there's a tool that I've used both in the public and private sector, and I'm sure people on the call probably are familiar with it. And it's called a legal risk assessment. And typically, what you do is you evaluate how your client does business, you evaluate the different business lines, all the different things your client produces. You think then through, right, how risky is that thing they're doing, right? How much in the next, let's say, year risk is going to be created, whether that's statutory, whether that's some kind of other risk, right? You quantify that from a legal perspective, then you plot it out, then you try to think through mitigation strategies. Once you think through those mitigation strategies, you replot it out, and then you develop an implementation plan to mitigate those risks that you've identified. And that kind of becomes your Bible for the next 6, 12 months, 24 months, however long the legal assessment is support to. And it helps you control, right, expectations with your client. It helps you help your client understand, hey, you gave me these resources. We agreed that here are the risks I'm trying to mitigate from a legal perspective. So here is how I'm going to allocate these resources. And when new things come up, it helps you have the conversation with your client to go, hey, in this situation, we agreed that this was the risk I'm mitigating. Now you want me to spend money over here. Just understand that's going to push this back.
Mm.
If you're doing a routine risk assessment and you're really understanding how your client operates in the, political, financial, business environment it operates in, then you should have a very clear understanding of where are there areas you can what people call fast fail in, right? Where are the areas where the risk and the reward are aligned sufficiently so if you do fail, it does not cause a cascading issue for your client. And I think that's the first and most fundamental question a general counsel should ask when thinking about deploying AI. Where are the places I can deploy it that will be self-contained? And if it does fail, I can reform very fast and my client seamlessly will not see an issue. But I think you have to start with understanding your client's risk profile and how the legal team interacts with that risk profile. Once you do that, I think you have the freedom to fail. You should only deploy, like sort of you said in that risk continuum, should only deploy AI in areas where there is a low risk, high reward. Where if AI is able to take away these tasks, me and my team can get to these other tasks, which add so much more value to our client. You don't want to, there have been all kinds of horror stories in the media about people using ChatGPT to file briefs and ChatGPT creating legal cases and legal sites, and then them not fixing it on the background and judges sanction them and all kinds of things like that. And at the end of the day, I think that comes from a place where they didn't understand the risk environment they were deploying artificial intelligence. They didn't understand that, hey, I'm submitting a brief to a court, and it is likely that the court will check my sources, that someone will look into this brief. So maybe this isn't the appropriate place to deploy AI without verifying.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't. However, in an internal memo, maybe that is the appropriate place to deploy AI because this internal memo is only going to be seen by a few people. It's only going to be used in this way. And if someone discovers an issue, it's only going to take a few hours for me to reform and resubmit. I think those are the real conversations you have to have internally to really understand the use case you're deploying it in and the risk that if it does go wrong, who will it affect, how great the effect will be, and how fast could you come up with an alternative solution?
Mm. These are such great frameworks, I think, that people can take away and apply and think about where to deploy AI. Let's say, because with all technology, and especially I think with AI, with how fast it's evolving, there's going to be an adoption curve. And I think today there's still a lot of legal teams that are hesitant around using AI, and maybe they feel a little bit better about actually I'm nervous about AI, but it's because I'm thinking about it holistically, and there's areas to deploy AI with like I like the phrase you used, it was like low risk, high reward, right? And maybe that's where they start. But like for the legal teams or the people on this call that are still maybe hesitant about using AI, like why wait versus start now? Do you have a sense of, because a lot of people always also can say like maybe we just wait and see how this whole thing plays out, and we'll join the bandwagon eventually. What are your thoughts generally on people that are sitting a little bit, in the back when it comes to AI?
I think every piece of technology, depending upon, especially as a lawyer, depending upon your practice, right, may have its place in your practice.
Mm,
And it may not. But the
mm,
only way you know is if you try it out. And so to me, I think with artificial intelligence, there are enough, this is a term of art, sandboxes that exist where you can create an environment that you can safely deploy, test, and see if it works with your practice. I think we all have to recognize that it's not going away. Its productivity, the productivity curve that it may put human beings on is undeniable. And so, from a productivity perspective, it's not going away. That doesn't mean it's applicable to every use case. It doesn't mean it's applicable to every business case. But I'm simply saying that, hey, it's not going away. This is not one of those things like a DeLorean that we're going to think is going to lead to a flying car and nobody drives them anymore. This is more like an iPhone, and eventually everyone's going to walk around with a smartphone in their pocket. And so I think we can always be slow and conservative in deploying new assets and things, but I think we still have to do ourselves the service of trying them, of reading the
mm,
literature, of figuring out what they can and can't do, and determining whether at this moment that is applicable to your practice or applicable elements in your practice, or it's not. If it's not today, that's perfectly fine. At least you did the research. And in the future, as AI progresses, maybe it will become, and you can reassess that. But I think to sort of put it on the shelf and tell ourselves that, hey, we don't need to learn that, we'll learn that at some point in the future, you're doing your own personal practice a disservice, and you're really doing your client a disservice, because there are a lot of ways that this could be deployed to make your services more efficient and more cost effective for your client, which I know I'm an in-house counsel. Some people think that doesn't matter, but to me, it does matter, because the more money I can save my client in the work I do, the easier it is to justify when I really need that employee, or I really need that other service, or we really need to do this thing, because I can say, hey, I saved you this money here. Can you let me deploy it there?
mm. I love that. Because I always hear like GCs struggle to build the business case for additional headcount because um, legal is already such a big cost line, I think, on the G&A, and everyone in the business is always busy. So just saying that we need more headcount because we're underwater often doesn't resonate with a CFO. And often we come from it at an angle of, well, if you have the data to prove that, you can have better conversations. But you're actually saying if you lead with value and you help the company save money through AI and automation, that's goodwill that you can cash in. That's actually, if you've saved hard dollars for the business, in some sense, there's some, there's going to be a lot more leeway for you to then redeploy that.
Because
And
I
the
think that's the only way
trust.
you manage a budget. That's the only
Yeah,
way, that's the only way
I like
you
that.
manage a budget functionally. You have
Mm.
to, right, show that you're a part of the team and trying to save dollars. I think I want to touch on something to your question. I think I've
Mm.
often told people the way people have the FTE or software or conversation, I've always thought we do it wrong. And when I say wrong, I think we miss an important piece. You said the data. I think the reason I can tell you how much one FTE costs in work hours is because that's how I think about the work we do. And that's why
Mm.
to me the data is so important. So I know that 1,912 work hours equals an FTE. So when I get data from a system that shows how much my existing team is working, the moment I get to a point where there are 1,912 hours extra, I know,
Yes.
hey, I'm at the point where I can justify another full-time employee. I'm
Yes.
at the point where now I can say, hey, from a workload perspective, with all of the tasks you're asking us, the new task, that's going to cost this many work hours. And that many work hours translates to a person. Most people, from a money perspective, right? If I just told you, hey, I need $200,000 to hire someone, you're going to go, probably not. You don't need 200,000 to hire someone. But if I told you, hey, based on this, that, and this, that's going to add 1,912 work hours to my team. And because of that, we need to hire a new person. You're going to go, we did ask you to do those things. Oh, wow, that's how much time it takes to do those things. Okay, let's look at getting you a new FTE, or maybe those aren't the right places to put those tasks.
Hmm.
And so I think as a general counsel, it's important just for managing a budget. From that perspective, you have to understand that what work trans means in hours and what hours means in employees and what hours could mean in software or programs or other resources. And when you can have that conversation holistically, and you also understand how to bank some goodwill by saving the client money by deploying some resources instead of FTEs, it makes, in my opinion and my professional experience, makes those conversations a lot easier with your CFO or your CEO when you go to them and go, you know what, this time I actually need an FTE. Hey, we've done everything we possibly could from a software perspective, from an artificial intelligence perspective, from a workload to manage this workload, but we just need an FTE because these new tasks are going to cause this much workload, and I can't ask my existing staff to absorb that because of where they already are.
Yeah. I'm smiling a lot because I think this is such incredible, like you've distilled it in such a simple way, but it's something that is, I think a lot of legal departments struggle to do. And what you've shared is so incredibly valuable in terms of again, like how you think about the economics and the budget of a legal department. And it's such a big part of it because so much of our budget isn't just about like work units and the in-house team that we have to do it, but also the spend with external counsel, right? So much of running a legal department, if you're a GC or a legal ops, is about resource allocation. It's about prioritization. It's about budget deployment. And so this is such an important topic, and how AI and its value plays into both the efficiency piece, but actually the cost savings piece, is such an important, I think, future that's here today about like how you should think about the business model of running a legal department. So that's incredible advice. Um, so with sort of like we're almost at the end of the session here. Like, where do you see all of this going? A very big question. Like like we looked at the administrative tasks today and showed some real examples and things like that. But like if we were to look out a little bit to the horizon, what does the future of work look like for in-house teams? And I won't hold your word. I won't make this one of those things where it's like, what's your 2027 prediction? And I laugh at you when you get it wrong. Take a stab at it. Like, where's this going, George?
Well, let me caveat this with saying if I'm right about this, someone should ask me the winning lottery numbers and I'll put them down in the chat and we'll all be rich. No, I think I personally see in the future, when I am hiring staff or attorneys, your ability to leverage AI to complete tasks is going to be essential to me wanting to hire you. Um, I think, to borrow a stupid football analogy, and this is a stupid football analogy, and I normally hate to use them, but it applies here. Um, in the National Football League, the old moniker is the more you can do, the longer you stay. So it represents that most fans see a cornerback, but to a coach, he'll see a cornerback, special teams gunner, kickoff returner, right? And so one person can be five different positions on a football team, and therefore, instead of having to have five players, I have one. And from a legal in-house perspective, I really do see artificial intelligence as that force multiplier. As people who know how to use it, they turn from one FTE to 3 or 4 FTEs because they're able to leverage the artificial intelligence in an efficient way to complete more tasks. And from an in-house perspective, there's just no way around it that's valuable. There's just no simple way around it that one employee who can leverage AI to complete the tasks of 3 employees is more valuable than the employee who can't. And so I think moving forward, looking forward into the future, the haves, so to speak, are going to be the paralegals, the junior associates, the associates, the legal secretaries who've learned how to master and leverage AI. They are going to be in high demand. They are going to be able to sort of write their own ticket and grow their career as they want. And I think that people who are slow to adopt it, it's not that they won't still find legal jobs, because certainly I do not think in our current society that legal work is going anywhere or going to reduce at any point in time. But I do think that there will be greater value added by those folks who learn how to master those services, those products, how to use them efficiently in their current day to day. I think that people will be willing to pay a premium for that.
That is such a powerful message. And I think I could not agree more. Uh, I think like the other axis of it as well is like as we have people be more productive with AI, we can hopefully also return some time back to being humans, right? Because I feel like legal departments are also typically overworked. There's more work than there are, people to do it. And and that's also where I see a lot of burnout. It's actually the fact that there's more work than we have the capacity to resolve, but then also a lot of the times we're dealing with like this BS work that's administrative and you have to get it done anyway. And so I wonder if a future is one that's also happier at the workplace with AI, right? Hopefully it's not one of those situations where we're more efficient and then work scales even more. Hopefully it's one where, we catch up a little bit.
And I
What do you
think,
think?
especially from an application perspective, I won't speak to the private sector, but I will speak to the public sector. I think you're hitting on something that's absolutely right. I think that the future goal would or should be is that, especially in the public sector, that these forms of artificial intelligence return time to the employees. That
Mm,
now for an employee, right, or for a business case, we don't have to have employees in the office 5 days a week or even open the office 5 days a week. Maybe now, because of the collective efficiency of everyone learning how to, leverage artificial intelligence, now we can close now we're only working 32 hours a week and we can close the office one day and everybody gets Fridays off or something
nice.
like that. But I do think, not to sound unrealistically rosy, AI does have the potential to make human beings efficient to the point where we can now dedicate more time to the other things that we value in life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know that Michelle, she's in our marketing team. She leads it. She's told me before, Evan, why hasn't humans created 3-day weekends and 4-day work weeks? That makes so much sense. So she'll be a big fan of that. Last thing I'll leave you with, George, what's one thing, doesn't have to be in legal, doesn't have to be professional, it can be personal as well, but it can be professional. What's one thing that AI was able to do for you recently that actually surprised you?
It wasn't necessarily me, but it was a colleague of mine who
Yeah.
was having fun with ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT, "How do I become governor?"
Oh,
And I assumed, let me not say I thought, I assumed that it would struggle with that question. But it asked him to upload his resume, and then it provided him a 10-year plan, a detailed 10-year plan of steps he could take that would make him qualified based on his resume to run for governor and the steps that it takes to qualify to get on the ballot to be governor
wow.
in 34 different states.
Wow.
And I thought about that for a second. and I was somewhat perplexed. And then I asked him to show me the plan. And again, trust but verify. I vetted the plan. And I went, it's not a bad plan. It's not a horrible plan. That sort of makes sense. And I was surprised at the depth of, right, because people pay millions of dollars to political consultants to do that kind of work for them. And it took ChatGPT a resume in 10 minutes to sort of figure out this plan that, again, it did need color. There were some more details that needed to be in it, but it was a very good, for my opinion, framework to do it. And I was very impressed at that aspect of it, that it was able to think from an aspirational perspective and create a plan to get to the aspiration using available data, which, like I said, most people can't. Most of us can't, right? Most of us have dreams, but we can't necessarily create a path or a plan for it to get there. And so I was impressed and surprised by that.
Yeah. AI is surprisingly a very good coach in many, whatever you want to get better at, it's a very good coach in that sense. So with that, George, I mean, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I think you and I could speak about this stuff forever. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was loads of fun. And for everyone else who has joined on today, thank you for your time as well. I look forward to chatting more offline, and I'll see you soon, Rabid Goldfish.
See you, Evan.
See you, George. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Go with the Workflow. If you found it valuable, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Spotify or Apple Podcast. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leave a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast too. That's all for now, so we'll see you at the next episode.